My name is Connor. I am I'm always I'm kind of the worst at elevator introducing myself because I never know like where to start. But I'll start with I was working. I guess backtrack. I graduated from the University of Washington, I think 2 years ago at this point. Um, in got my degree in environmental studies, which is nothing related to what I do now, which I'll get to. I've always been interested in the environment, like sustainability and stuff, and so it seemed like a decent path, I guess, in college. And then pretty much right out of school, I got a job or an internship that turned into a job at a public relations agency. So I did that for a year. Um, got a lot of good experiences with the agency world, communications, media relations, all that good stuff. I liked some aspects of the job and PR, not others, because I always knew I wanted to be my own boss and kind of do my own thing. So on the side, since November 2022, I believe, I started working with this e-commerce brand, this clothing brand, helping them with their email marketing and SMS marketing. And I kind of just stumbled upon that, like email marketing. I think it was on Twitter that I came across some accounts talking about it. I'm like, sure, why not? Like, I like writing. I'm decent-ish at design, so I'll kind of go with it. And so started doing that, and then quit my PR job in June of 2023, which was last year. Um, Aside from that too, I was working at a part-time job as a youth soccer coach. So for about a year and a half, I worked in the evenings and on the weekends coaching 13-year-old girls. So that was a fun experience, but it was a big commitment. So I stopped doing that as well. And then just, yeah, so it's been almost a year now that I've been just doing kind of my own business. And what I do is helping coaches, creators, personal brands, agencies, still a bit of e-com work with their mostly email systems, a bit of ghostwriting, and email SMS marketing. So that's kind of all over the place, but I guess hopefully brief kind of about who I am.
Yeah, no, that's really awesome. And so going off of that, you do email and marketing and everything like that. Did you learn that specifically in your agency, or did how did you learn that?
No, so I learned it mostly on my own. I think I got so kind of going back. I started looking on Twitter and found, I guess, the side of like money Twitter that we're kind of on and a lot of people are talking about. So I think it was Wiz of Ecom, if you know him.
Hmm.
He I found his account first, I believe it was, and he was talking about this thing called email marketing. And at the time it was kind of popping off and I became interested in it because I was like, first of all, I know I've always wanted to do my own thing. Email is a lot of writing. I've always liked writing and been a strong writer. And then it was like, oh, like I guess I'll test. I was in the experimental phase. I was like testing everything out, testing and just trying different stuff. So I guess I started doing a little bit of like web design, like worked with a buddy, like a friend of mine to help him with his website because I thought I wanted to do like web design first. And then I'm like, no, like so transition to email. And a lot of it was just learning on my own. So learning the, I guess, advice from people on Twitter and then taking that advice and implementing it for myself. So I created like lead magnets of my own. I created different like simple landing pages and email funnels. And as I was doing that, I'm like, dang, this is really fun. Like it's writing, but it's also there's a lot that goes into it on the back end.
Hmm.
So like the email flows and kind of sales campaigns and all that. And I'm like, this is pretty enjoyable, something that I enjoy. And so I mostly just learned initially on my own. Didn't do too much at my PR job. We did like newsletters for certain clients, but we were in the space. We worked with law firms, we worked with banks and like healthcare, and so it's very different. That was one of the reasons why I wasn't a huge fan of that job, just because the industries weren't my, I guess, passion, you could
Hmm.
say.
Yeah.
So I did like a little bit over there, but not to the extent of what I do now. So a lot of it was just taking lessons and kind of tips and advice from people I found online or Twitter. I've taken a few courses like over since I kind of got started just to hone my craft. But a lot of it was just experimentation on my own end and kind of learning on my own.
Mhm. So you say experimentation. What like everything that you tried out of all of them, why was email the one that you went with?
Mm. I think I was just most drawn to it. So, like I said, did some web design a little bit, not like a whole lot, design kind of simple websites and stuff, but I I'd much rather be writing for like hours on end as opposed to designing for hours on end, which is also one of the reasons why I recently I started out in the e-commerce world, got my first client that I still work with the clothing brand client for email marketing. So it's e-com is more design heavy just because that's um, like you want to display the products, and a lot of people who are shopping for, let's say, clothing specifically are like more visual, like they want the visual stuff. So
Mhm.
e-com is definitely more design heavy, and so initially I liked the combination of design and writing and all the things I was learning about like the back end email systems and automations and everything. So I put them together and I was like, okay, like this is something that I it's kind of at the intersection of my interests and the intersection of my strengths. Like I'm not the best designer, I'm not the best writer, but like I'm good enough at both of them to um, be pretty good when it comes to like end results. So yeah, I guess it was just I wanted to do something that was more, I guess, long answer short. I wanted to do something that was more like along the lines of what I could see myself doing for like all day and not get super bored or tired of it. And I feel like would get I pretty quickly and easily got tired of like web design. So that's kind of like the indication of like, okay, maybe I should switch to something else that I'm more passionate about, I guess. I feel like passion is kind of like a cliche, but it's
Mhm.
true. Like especially right, like for example, we're both writers and like for others, like a lot of people aren't good at writing, or like they look at it and they're like, okay, this seems like a lot of work, but to us it's kind of like play. And so I
Mhm.
always take that quote and that I really like that quote that's like find something that looks like work to others but feels like play to you. And so with what I currently do now and kind of why I transitioned to working mostly with like personal brands and coaches and creators in the creator economy, like that is super fun and entertaining and enjoyable for me. And to a lot of other people, it might look like work. Like whatever they do, it looks like work, but they have something that feels like play to them. So that's kind of my reasoning for, I guess, narrowing down on what I currently do.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you mentioned that you still work for this clothing brand and everything. What was the process to not only like get them to be your first client, but to where they are now, being you're still retaining them and everything?
Yeah, definitely. So the process, so I initially, when I first started to try to go do something on my own in the space of when I narrowed down to email marketing, I found a bunch of clothing brands, specifically clothing brands on Instagram. So Instagram and TikTok are, I mean, two good platforms for like e-commerce
Mhm.
specific. So if anyone who's trying to get into e-commerce, those are two kind of like the main platforms still. So I was like, okay, like there's probably a lot of clothing brands and e-commerce brands on Instagram. So I'll just find a lot to reach out to. So I think I reached out. I found like I don't remember what my process was for finding them specifically, but the suggestions. Once you find one, the suggestions really help. I think that was part of my process. So I reached out to like 30 via DMs, and I was like, it was a pretty. Looking back, it was like not the best outreach approach because I had like no experience, no case studies, testimonials, not even like I'd never done it for anyone, and so my message was something like, hey, like take a look at your website and have a few recommendations on how you could improve and increase your revenue with email marketing. Would you be interested in me sending them over or something along those lines? And out of the 30 or so messages I sent, this company was, I think, the only one that replied. Maybe there were like two others that replied, but this was the only one that was like showed a genuine interest.
Mhm.
And it helped. They were small enough where it was still like the founder um, was like the one who's handling. I think he still handles their Instagram, so it's like I feel like easier when it's more of a small community based brand as opposed to a huge corporation because there's a lot of um, like things to go through with huge corporations. But
Mhm.
so they responded. I sent them over some recommendations, and it honestly took it was like back and forth. I did like a few projects for them for free just to get some initial momentum, gain some experience, and get a testimonial and case study. And then it was kind of back and forth for like a year, honestly. So I did the initial a little bit of work for like a month or two, and then kind of like they stopped communicating with me, and it was kind of like we didn't both ghost each other, but it's kind of like if you can imagine what that would look like. So I officially, I guess, signed them as a client in like 2022. So November 2022 when I first signed them. But then the DM message to them on Instagram, I think, was a year prior. So
Oh, wow.
as you can imagine, it was like a long process of like kind of like back and forth, kind of um neither of us like respond like at least it was mostly the brand like didn't respond and stuff. They're probably going through a lot of um initial growth in that phase. And so when I reached back out, I finally reached back out to them, I think when I first started working with them. And the guy was like, "Yeah, like thanks for reaching out. Sorry, I've been um, not responding and stuff." Like they went through a lot of changes with like their website and their growth and their vision. Like they rebranded
Mhm.
completely. So it was a good time to reach back out to them. And then I yeah started work with them. Kind of we agreed upon something. It was pretty small. So it was like I'd help them with their email automations, SMS automations, and any like weekly campaigns that they had. And then so what I currently do for them is I send a weekly newsletter for
Mhm.
them. So that's the main thing is they're a mental health focused clothing brand. So they donate a percentage of proceeds to Mental Health of America. So as you can imagine, like there's a big community aspect behind it, which is the reason why I love working with them still, like, they're not by any means, like, my biggest, um, client in terms of, like, revenue for me, but, like, I really love the mission and kind of the freedom that the work comes with. So I send weekly newsletters called Finally Good Friday. So it's like weekly tips and resources and stories on like self-improvement and mental health and self-care kind of. And it's fun, but it's also something that's relatable for everyone, in my opinion. Like everyone goes through different things related to their mental health. Like we all face challenges and ups and downs of life, and that's just life. So I think it's something that's relatable and something a lot of people can get behind. So I think creating a community like that and creating the weekly newsletter was like a big catalyst for their growth. So they grew a ton like last year, continuing to grow. So to see them go from like when I first reached out to them, they're like this tiny brand using what are they using? They're using like Squarespace and didn't really have anything like set up like and it's completely different brand today, which it's cool to see the progress and kind of how I've been able to help them grow through building and helping them like establish more of a community around the brand.
Yeah, that's really cool. And so you say they're not your biggest retainer, and of course, everything like that. The experience they gave you is obviously worth way more. But
Yeah.
as you've grown and like quit your job and everything like that, how have like has gaining clients happened for you? Like what is your technique to getting clients now?
Yeah. So honestly, once I quit my job last year, it wasn't on a whim, but I was like, I wasn't making like a lot of people would be like, you should be making your like at least match your let's say freelancing income with your 9 to 5 income. Like I wasn't. I was just like, I'm just gonna go out and do it kind of that mentality. So I think that one client, and then I I used referrals, and that's when I started to get serious about social media and building my personal brand because I'm like, okay, like if I'm going to make this my full time thing, I need to get attention, build authority, build trust, and a personal brand on Twitter and LinkedIn is like the best way to go because also I know like my ideal target client is on those platforms. So I started to get serious about social media, doing a lot of honestly, the first few months was slow and a lot of experimentation. So I got a referral from the one client that I was working with, and then did just kind of went hard on like the cold outreach approach, which I don't know what your thoughts are on that. I think we talked about like last week on stuff. So definitely like there's pros and cons to cold outreach and anything like in any industry.
Mhm.
But that's kind of what I did because I didn't know really a better approach. So I sent a bunch of cold DMs specifically on Twitter, and it turns out for me it worked out decent. Like I got two clients, two projects from it. So definitely depending on your approach to your outreach strategy, like it can work. Um, might not be as effective as some other methods, but that was kind of the approach. And then I was experimenting with like cold emails and these different outreach channels. But I think at the end of the day, I think we talked about this last time, like last week when we were on our space, but the best approach, in my opinion, the most effective, like, is the longer approach of just starting conversations with people
Mhm.
because that already builds trust, and it builds this sense of like actually wanting to help as opposed to reaching out just for the sake of like getting a quick buck or by those terms, right? So, um, definitely, I think I would have leveraged, like looking back, if I were to give myself advice, I'd say definitely start building and doing more earlier. Like looking back, I'm like, dang, like I should have been doing XYZ like more. Like I could have been doing more to get to like quicken up speeding up the process, I guess, those first few months. Um so I guess you didn't really ask advice for anyone else. But my advice for like anyone who's looking to get started with something or in similar shoes to how I was back last year, I would say like don't be afraid to go out and do something, but you actually have to put in like much more work than you realize to actually get momentum, which I feel like I was kind of just like dilly-dallying
Mhm.
for a little bit, honestly. So yeah, definitely pros and cons. There's been some ups and downs, but that's kind of the approach that I took. A lot of um, starting conversations, a lot of outreach, and then just continue to build your personal brand to gain authority, gain trust, get people to know, like, and trust you. I think that's the huge one.
Yeah, definitely. Piggybacking off of that. So because I joined X through like Dan Cohen and everything, he really sells like the you can do this in 4 hours a day. And like
Yeah,
while that sounds like really good, I agree with that because like for the last couple months I've been kind of dilly dallying. It's like, oh, I only have to do this for 4 hours a day. It's like, no, there's gonna be
yeah,
nights where you do have to stay up and send 20, 30 cold emails or whatever the current outreach system is. And so
yeah,
I love that's your piece of advice because everyone else is like, well, no,
definitely.
it's not that hard. And I'm like, it's
And
hard.
it's simple, but that doesn't mean it's easy.
Mhm.
And I think the big thing too is you really have to be disciplined and be like it's great to be your own boss and everything, but I've fallen into the trap of like, oh, like I'm gonna skip this week's like writing this week's newsletter or this week's or like an email today because I just don't feel like it kind of like I've fallen into that trap before and it's like, okay, if there was someone like if I was working for someone, they were my boss and like I couldn't just skip
Mhm.
like writing this newsletter. I couldn't skip sending 10 messages to people on Twitter because I'd probably get fired. So I think that's something that you also have to be aware of and like if you really want to make it work, you do have to have a lot of discipline and it's going to take work. Like you see, like you said, Danko, like mentioning a lot of people are like the 4 hour workday, which is great. Like I would love to get to that point. I think that's still like my ultimate goal is like be sustainable, consistent, do something that I enjoy and only work like a few hours each day, like writing.
Mhm.
But in the beginning, it is going to be a grind. Like you can't really put in you maybe could put in like 3 hours if you're super focused and disciplined, but like for most people, that's not the reality. So I
Mhm.
think just having those long-term expectations and realizing that like it's going to take a lot of work to actually get to the point where you have enough momentum, you have built the leverage, and then you can be like, okay, like now I can work, let's say 2 hours in the morning and just like have everything working my way kind of.
Mhm.
So it takes work to get to that point is kind of what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And so kind of piggybacking off of that, if you had to start not only like your email skills and everything from square one, but also your personal brand from square one, what would your day-to-day look like trying to rebuild everything that you have now?
That's a great question. I've thought about this recently because with especially with Twitter and any sort of social media, like I've known people who have gotten suspended for no reason, had to rebuild from square one. So I've kind of been thinking about this. I would probably, if I didn't have an email list though, initially, I would still have, I like to think like you can always be growing your network. So I'm still obviously continue to grow my network, but at this point I have a lot of people in my network who I consider friends, mentors, coaches, whoever those people are, who I would kind of reach out to and be like, "Hey, like my account got suspended. Any support would be, appreciated." So like obviously continuing to put out content every single day, like helpful content, entertaining content, personality content that is going to like build up your personal brand again. So I'd say that's the big one is like kind of tapping to my network of people that I have right now, and then kind of making it known that like I'm starting over. Um, and then I guess your question is more along the lines of like if I didn't have a network, which we can get into in a minute. But I think the premise is similar. Like just open up Twitter or whatever platform you choose, and just start engaging with people you look up to and
Mhm.
like accounts that you and people that you like. Like it's a personal brand at the end of the day. I always like to think that like everyone, there's going to be, for example, for me who does like email marketing, there's thousands of people like on Twitter probably who do the same thing as I do. So what is it that's going to get people to pay attention to me and become my client as opposed to working with someone else? And so I think that's the big thing to think about is like having a really, really clear and unique and irresistible offer. It is cliche, like, I feel like irresistible offer nowadays is, like, the cliche thing, but, like, it does all start with having an incredible offer because that's what's ultimately gonna get attention and get you money in your pocket, and so I'd say start with my offer, and then as I'm building my offer, creating it, it doesn't take that long to, like, make an offer, right? But, after I have that down, I would definitely reach out to as many people as I can on social media. Um, kind of just starting conversations. I think I do mix probably of like starting conversations and then the kind of cold open of pitching my offer just to see what
Mhm.
sticks. Because if I'm in a time crunch or I need to make this work in like let's say a few months, like you're gonna need to test a lot and you're gonna need to do like volume. Like volume is the key, I think, when you're starting from scratch. And so I would say that and then continuing to put out content that's authority building, personality, like get people to like share your stories, experiences, get people to know, like, and trust you. And then um definitely I would work for free or for very cheap at the beginning. It does suck to do that, but I think that's, in my opinion, one of the best ways to get like an insane case study, get an insane testimonial that you can leverage forever. Because all it takes is one really, really good case study or testimonial from someone, and then you can leverage that for the rest of your career, essentially. So I would probably start reaching out to people kind of in the same approach that I did when I first got my one client. Reach out to a lot of people, offer to work for free or very cheap, and then get them insane results first and foremost. Get them insane results so that you get a killer testimonial and hopefully a killer case study that you can then leverage on your personal brand that you can leverage to get more clients and then increase the price every time you get another client. Is kind of my that's probably my approach if I was starting completely from scratch.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
That's I think it's an awesome and it's a solid approach. It's just like scary approach I think for a lot of people because they're like,
yeah,
this isn't easy or this isn't like an overnight thing, and it's like it can
yeah,
be if you send 2,000 emails in a day, but
and I think that's kind of a false reality. You see all these overnight success stories
Mhm.
where they're not really overnight success stories, like, it takes years and it takes like, consistency over a long period of time to get to the point of people being like, "Oh, you're just an overnight success." Like, it happens so quickly for you. For example, like, I know John Brosio on Twitter, I think Nicholas Cole, like, they were writing on Quora, Medium for, like, years
Mhm.
before, kind of building what they have now on their Twitter account, and it does like, it takes doing one thing or like a few things over a really long time very consistently to get to the point of becoming like what people see as an overnight success or a quick success. And so I think it's just like a matter of putting in the work consistently and then being patient in the long run. Like you're like going to it thinking like knowing that it's a long-term game. And if you don't have the long-term mindset that's required to like actually get and build a successful brand or build a successful business, like you're not really going to make it if you can just be like, oh, I'm gonna get rich quick in the next like 3 months. Like, yes, like some people do, but that's not how easy it is. Like, that's
Mhm.
not most people. So
Yeah.
having patience and seeing it in the long run.
Yeah, that's actually a really good piece of advice. And kind of hopping off what you were just talking about regarding like how we could say like building an offer is really easy when like someone is just starting and everything. What was your like catalyst to finding your unique offer, which is now the Sandman Succession? What does that
Yeah.
look like? And like what would you recommend for people trying to find that unique positioning?
Yeah. I would say so starting out, I really had no idea. Honestly, like you really have no idea what you're doing when you start. It was just taking the advice of, like, what I saw on Twitter from, like, Wiz of Ecom, who I think he put out, like, a thread of, like, these are the email automations that are best right now or whatever, and it's like so I kind of followed the process of for my client when I was starting, follow the process of what I was hearing from other successful people. I'm like, "Okay, like, I'm just gonna build this out." And it was really simple, like, I built out their email flows and did like any campaign that they needed. But I think to create a really irresistible offer that's unique and gets attention, you need to have something different. And in order to do that, I think one of the best ways is to create kind of a I like to create like a hybrid offer in a way. So right now my offer is a mix of done for you email marketing, email ghostwriting with consulting. So I
Mhm.
get on weekly calls with clients, walk them through everything that they need to kind of sell the system. After like 12 weeks, they have everything they need to sell the system to their own clients. And that's something that's unique. Like when you combine two different helpful and kind of interesting things, I guess. Like so like I'll do the writing for you and I'll work with you like one on one. I think that is when it comes to become like a really unique and irresistible thing that nobody else has kind of seen before and not many other people do. So I think in that way, just putting your own spin on like you don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel. Obviously, like what is working with, let's say, email marketing or with ghostwriting, like that's always probably at least not always, but it's if it's working, like if other people are having success with it, like there's a demand for it and it's
Mhm.
working. But I think the important thing is to like put your own spin on it. Like how can you create a unique positioning or offer something that's unique and different from 99 other ghostwriters or email marketers out there? And it could just be like a small thing or a positioning thing. Like I think the another kind of it's not necessary, I would say, but to have a unique name for it. So, for example, like I came up with the name Sandman Succession because it had a good ring to it, and it was like the system is kind of helping your business grow overnight, kind of like Sandman. So I was like, okay, I'll go with this, and then I would say creating like a unique kind of name for it will build curiosity. Like a lot of people will reach out who I'll start conversation with, and they're like, "Oh, like tell me more about Sandman Succession. Like that's a cool name. What is it?"
I did
Yeah.
that.
So yeah. So it's like it if you create something that builds curiosity and builds hype, I guess, or like demand. I'm trying to think of the right word. I guess hype. Like builds hype. Like, oh, this sounds awesome. I this is awesome, this is different, this is helpful, this is something I need. I think those kind of 3 or 4 things I just mentioned are like the when you know you have a killer irresistible offer. So I would say, yeah, kind of follow that, and just be you. Like people wanna work with other people, and I think that's one of the reasons why personal brand is so powerful is because people are bored at like they don't want to work with just like a faceless corporation. They connect and want to work with people who they actually like and trust. And I think that's the huge reason for like personal brands are so huge right now and will be in the future is like people want to work with other people. It's like a connection thing. So yeah, kind of cliche but true.
No, I love that. I love how, like, seamless that was because it's like it isn't as technical as I feel like we always make it out to be. Like, "Oh,
Yeah.
I need all of these perfect psychological loops in here," and it's like, "No, you literally just had fun with it," which is super
Yeah.
cool.
Right. I think that's the main part of business too. Like what's the point of building a personal brand or building a business and working with people if you're not actually having fun with it or you can't enjoy the time you have. So like I know for a lot of people, like the reason why they kind of came to the side of Twitter that we're on and like started to build their own online business is like time freedom. Um, they didn't want to like work for someone else. They want to spend more time with their families and have, consistent like good income while having fun. And I think that's like the big thing. Like, what's the point of it? What's the point of everything like that you're building if you can't actually enjoy it? So I think it's important to like look at it from that perspective too of like what like build something that you'll actually enjoy, you're excited about, and that, will help other people, and I think that's when you're like, "Okay, like, I have something really, really good right here."
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that kind of comes down to like the disconnecting from like passion versus purpose. It's like passion is something that is selfish and purpose is something that's like built outside of yourself
Yeah,
for someone else.
yeah, I love that.
Yeah. And so as you've transformed your life and everything, obviously you're working for yourself, you're working for you and your family and supporting that. What is your ideal lifestyle that you've designed and what does it look like?
Mm. Like, right now, or I feel like it's different right now versus where I want it to be in the future, so I guess I'll go over both of those.
Sweet.
Right now, I'd say it's a lot of unfortunately and unfortunately, I guess, like, pros and cons. It's a lot of, like, connecting with others in the DMs, which as especially, like, once you get to the point of kind of building what you have into trying to get into a successful business, it's like it does take a lot of conversations, which is great because you meet all these really cool people, but then you're kind of like you open up Twitter or LinkedIn and like your DMs are just like overflowing kind of,
Flooded.
and it's like so overwhelming, which I'm sure you've experienced before. And so a lot of it is just unfortunately kind of going through like not at least me too, because I'm more of like a perfectionist, unfortunately. So it's always like I know I don't have to respond to everything like not right away, but don't have to respond to everything that's not like moving the needle forward or whatever the saying is. But it's like I hate having the like unopened and unread kind of
Mhm.
notifications. So it's a double-edged sword. But a lot of it's that, a lot of it's writing for both myself and for clients I work with. We have like, you know, for example, right now I'm working with a brand and they've got the Memorial Day sale because Memorial Day is rare, like this weekend. So I've been kind of working a lot on that and putting out promoting the sale. So kind of ups and downs depending on for when it comes to client work. A lot of ups and downs for um, depending on like what's on the horizon, and then yeah, some calls, sometimes just networking calls, sometimes sales calls. Um, but I think switching a little bit, like ideally, I would want my days to look like a lot of not a lot, but like a few hours, kind of like the cliche typical like 4 hour workday or 2 hour workday that that Dan Co's kind of penned is like writing for an hour or two in the morning and kind of like like having built up the systems and the leverage that I know that amount of work. So like writing for myself for like an hour or two every single day, like doing that will move the needle forward and it'll get me clients, it'll get me customers. And I know like it'll, generate more revenue for my business. So I think that I really enjoy coaching others. So recently opened up a coaching program specifically geared towards people who are looking to get more started with like building their own online business. So currently working with a um, great student with that right now, and it's really fun. Like that part of it is really rewarding. Is like helping others. It's kind of like the purpose thing that we were just talking about, like
Mhm.
helping others like see their own kind of purpose and create something of their own. That's like wow, this changed my life. Kind of like that's very rewarding and fulfilling. So some coaching, like definitely more wanting to, I think, in the future go down the coaching route long term versus just doing like writing emails all day, if that makes sense. So
Mhm.
I think a lot of it with what we do is just a lot of experimentation and evolving and growing. Like you don't have to box your like pinhole box yourself into in a certain niche or like I'm only a ghostwriter, right? Because like I know you're like full stack ghostwriter. When I like asked about it when we first started talking, so it's cool to like stack skills, stack different things, and then evolve. Like, let's say you get bored of, I don't know, you get bored of like email marketing. Like maybe in the future I'll get bored of email marketing. I have the skills. Like I have the skills, I have the experiences that I can kind of transition to any other kind of area. Like I could coach others or just focus on coaching. I could, um, I don't know, write for like a blog probably like a kind of if I want to go back to more of a corporate thing. Like do a lot like you can evolve and change and grow over time. So um that's kind of the nice thing about what we do too is like you're always growing, learning new skills and you like as you get experience you just stack them and you can kind of do whatever you want with it like in the future. So that's one of the exciting things about what we do, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's the same thing about like the internet in general. You can learn
Yeah.
whatever you want, whenever you
Yeah.
want. And so, kind of bouncing off of like you mentioned systems and having good enough systems. How like what do your systems look like right now? Not only for email marketing, but also like for writing for your personal brand.
Yeah. So I the earlier this year I worked with a guy to help me build a pretty much it's cliche like the Notion second mind in Notion, but it's essentially like a business hub within Notion. So I use Notion for like my life is on Notion, honestly. Like I don't know if that's good or bad, maybe a bit of both. If Notion got hacked or whatever, I think that would be very bad for me and probably a lot of other people. So I use Notion. I have like systems and love templates to kind of like capture ideas. So if I'm on a walk or if I just come up with like or like this is a great idea for a piece of content that I could write tomorrow or next week, like I quick capture it in my Notion system. And you don't necessarily need Notion or like a fancy, you know, system. I think what you do need, like what's important to have is just a way to capture ideas in a quick way and a way to once you sit down at your laptop for writing for the day or doing client work for the day, like opening up your computer and knowing exactly what you're going to do and having, you know, the system or like if you need like a template or something like that, like just knowing exactly what you're going to do and then being able to do it in like the most efficient way. And so that's kind of one of the reasons why I love the Notion system that I have is because that allows me to do it. It's like task manager, CRM, content system. So just capture a bunch of content ideas and kind of am able to like see what I plan for the week and stuff. So I write in Notion. Um, I yeah, I do everything within Notion. And then in terms of like client work and stuff, I have these project databases in these client portals essentially. So I'm working with like let's say a few people if I'm working with them at one time, then I have like let's say 4 or 5 different databases, or I guess like maybe database isn't the right word, but like client hubs that I can like separate. So I think it's important to have like a separation thing, especially as you grow um, and scale your business. It's not necessarily as important if you're like just starting out, but it's nice and it's efficient to have something that's like you're able to as you grow and as you scale, like you're not spending more time necessarily like doing all these admin tasks. So I think that's one of the important things about like having systems and creating systems is like how can you make your business as efficient as possible? And as you scale and grow, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're spending more time in the business because at the end of the day, like I think everyone they'd like to grow, but also like spend their afternoons like with their family and like spending time with their loved ones and not like 24 hours in their business. So I think if it comes time to like building systems for your own business or writing or whatever it is, like just think about how you can make it as efficient as possible for you and as easy as possible to get the lever moving tasks done is kind of my advice.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of bouncing off of that. The only thing that I would slightly disagree with is in the beginning, separate everything because the moment you get your first client, it's going to be a shit show. Everything is going to be a
Yeah,
mess. Like
yeah,
physically everything, especially if you combine it with like your second brain and then you have your client stuff in the same area. Oh my god, it was terrible. Just separate them right off the bat. The moment you
yeah,
sign someone or even do free work, put it somewhere else.
yeah, and I think it's important too to note to have systems down, like, at least even if there's simple systems, have systems down before, let's say, signing your first client or signing, like, multiple clients, like you
Mhm,
mentioned, because when you're just starting out, you're gonna have so many questions and be like, "How the heck am I gonna do XYZ and all this and get this done?" And so, I think if you have even a simple system down before and you're like, "Okay, once I sign a client, this is I need XYZ, this is what I need, and I'm gonna put it here and, like, do all this and stuff," and you have, like, you know exactly what to do and where to put it, I guess, like,
mhm.
even if it's simple like that, like, I
Yeah.
think that's important. Um, and yeah, I was gonna add something to that, but I kind of blanked.
I get it. So, kind of switching it up a little bit as we wrap things up here as the hour comes. Jumping more into like actionable, super actionable advice. Are there any like books, courses, accounts, or anything like that that you would seriously recommend a beginner or even someone like my stage, your stage check out?
Mm, I would say that's a good question. I think it depends on what you are looking to do, and I would say so I guess I don't have necessarily specific people, maybe other than, like, like, any sort of writing is an important skill, and one of the best, accounts to follow for that would be Kieran Drew, in my
Mhm.
opinion. Kieran Drew, Dickie Bush, Nicholas Cole, because writing is no matter what you do, writing is the basis of pretty much everything on the internet. So I think those three people are very would be very helpful people to follow and kind of consume their ideas and content. But aside from that, I would say advice would just be to find like 3 to 5 people that you really look up to and really like their ideas and their content. So, for example, if you're a web designer and you're wanting to get started with freelance web design, find like a few people on Twitter or LinkedIn or wherever who have done what you wanna do. So, like, let's say they've built a successful free like, web design agency, like, find those people and just consume everything, like, all their ideas, all their content, any courses that they have, and just reverse engineer their success to get to where you wanna be. So, that's probably my biggest piece of advice too, is because I've heard the saying that's kinda stuck with me. It's like, if you listen to everyone, eventually all advice is gonna cancel out to 0.
Mhm.
So it's like for everyone that's like, "Oh, you should get into drop shipping or you should get into like ghostwriting," there's gonna be like 20 other people like, "No,
Yeah.
this is the best like thing to start," like if you're a beginner. So that's why I emphasize the importance of picking only a few specific people that you really like and look up to, and then consuming all their content and kind of you don't necessarily have to like box everything out, like the rest out, but I think it's important to focus really on those specific people so that you can be like, okay, you don't get conflicting advice or what's the not imposter syndrome, analysis paralysis. I think that's a
Mhm,
big one
mhm.
when you're a beginner because there's so many different things you could do, but kind of just pick a path, pick a few people to like follow or consume their content, their courses, all that stuff, and then just execute like crazy. Like put in the work. Write daily is probably one of the biggest things that you can do for just starting out. Like write whether it's a tweet or like a blog or an email. Like I think writing daily will help you so much, and I think a lot more people could benefit from that small habit.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, that was you answered like all of my last 3 questions with 1, so that was absolutely perfect. Is there anything else that you would like to add to your final say? Go for it.
mm, I would say this is kind of I only mention this because I think it's important, but I also wrote a tweet on it earlier. Is like if you don't know who, like a lot of people who are beginners struggle with finding or like thinking about who their audience is, who to write to. Like think about where you were 2 years ago, and then just write to that specific person and do what like create the things. answer the problems, answer the questions that they had like 2 years ago. Like, what were you thinking 2 years ago? Like, where did you want to be? I think once you write to your younger self, like it's cliche advice, but it really does help. I think wherever you're trying to go. So if you're stuck with like where to go, if you're a beginner, especially, or which audience, like you don't know what audience to write to or who to work with and stuff, like think about like yourself 2 years ago. What advice would they have wanted? What would they have needed 2 years ago to get to the point of where you're trying to be, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
I think that's like a simple thing that a lot of people could benefit from, especially if you're just starting out. So yeah.
Yeah, that's huge. Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on today. I really do appreciate your
Yeah,
time.
definitely. Thanks for
This was
having me, Brynn.
awesome. Yeah.
Thanks for having me, Brynn. Good to talk to you.